Hello, and welcome to the 10th Advent reflection in our theme, Space at the Table. And it's a huge table today that we're looking at because it's the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Now, Mark records this in chapter 6, and at the end of this, it says that 5,000 men were fed, so the crowd must have been bigger than that with women and children, so a huge number. Well, as a child, I really loved this story, and it just seemed like the most amazing miracle for Jesus to do. As I got older, unfortunately, my picture of this story was rather squashed by someone telling me that, of course, it wasn't a miracle at all. They brought their sandwiches and shared them with each other. Well, when we consider that this story is in all four Gospels, there's lots of detail in Mark's account, and there were 12 baskets of food left at the end. It does seem to rather point to a miracle rather than the sandwiches story. Okay, so let's look at the beginning of this story in Mark's Gospel, because it begins when the disciples had just come back. Jesus sent them out in their twos to preach good news, to preach repentance, and to bring healing to people and to claim authority over the evil spirits. And they come back and they're excited, probably exhausted as well, and telling Jesus all about it. And interestingly, just before this in the Gospel, Mark tells us of how John the Baptist has been beheaded. And quite possibly they would know about this and they would be really sad about this as well. So we read in verse 31, there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his disciples didn't even have time to eat. So not only were they tired and exhausted, they were hungry too. And Jesus straight away takes them away to a lonely place by boat over the Sea of Galilee. Meanwhile, all those people that were around were still desperate to be with Jesus and just couldn't give up the chance of being with him and ran round the side of the lake. And it must have been a long way because it's a big lake, picking up people from the towns and villages as they went, until when they arrived, there was an enormous crowd, and the disciples arrived there with Jesus. And Jesus, he sees them, and there's those beautiful words again. Jesus is full of compassion, and he sees them as sheep without a shepherd. So he starts to teach and to talk of all sorts of things. I'd love to have been there on that hillside to listen to what he said. It gets later. And the disciples, of course, they haven't had their food yet. They're still exhausted. And I think they just want to break the party up now and go home. I think they're probably a bit disgruntled. But Jesus turns round to them when they ask him this and says, "You feed them." Maybe a timely reminder to us to feed the hungry. But I think the disciples are even more grumpy, and they start saying, well, how can we do this? We haven't got enough money to go and get them food. But Jesus just says, well, what have you got? How much bread do you have? So they give him the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he uses what they have. He takes the bread and the fish, he gives thanks, he breaks the bread, he hands it to the disciples, who hand it out to all the people who have been sat in groups of 50 and 100, well organised. Just an amazing miracle. And when all that finishes, Jesus sends his disciples back across the lake. And he stays there, dismisses the crowd, and goes off himself to pray. So, what does this mean for us now? I often think that at Christmas time it is a bit, for me, like feeding the 5,000. So much to do, so much cooking, a lot of family to feed. And it's so easy to get caught up in all the busyness and all the preparation and just push Jesus out of it if you're not careful. But the crowd weren't like that. The crowd wanted to be with Jesus. They dropped everything for the day. They abandoned everything to be in Jesus' presence. And what a party they had with him. Let's, this Christmas, spend time with Jesus. And as Advent continues, let's see if we can listen to him. He wants to listen to us and is full of compassion. Let's give him our tiredness and our grumpiness, our sadness, and allow him to lead us. Let's hear his voice as he asks us to feed the hungry. God bless all of you.